Namaskar. Today we will be studying about sexual reproduction in organisms. In the previous sessions, we have already covered the various asexual mode of reproduction in organisms. Today we will try to understand that why the organisms they shifted from asexual reproduction to sexual reproduction. We will also cover a few terms and concepts in this part which are going to be of a lot of benefit to all of you in your further chapters. That is the chapter on sexual reproduction in flowering plants and sexual reproduction in human beings, plus the reproductive health, the next 3 chapters. So kindly you take note of these concepts and the definitions and the terms very carefully so that the further chapters will be easier to understand for all of you. So let us start off with the definition of sexual reproduction. What is sexual reproduction? Sexual reproduction is the process of development in which fusion and formation of gametes take place. That means that it is a type of reproduction in which the gametes are formed and they fuse. Now, before we move further, let us understand what is the origin of sexual reproduction. When did it originate? Sexual reproduction originated in the protistans and the simple algae. And slowly, the sexual reproduction became the main mode of reproduction in all of the higher organisms. Now, what are the characteristics of sexual reproduction? The sexual reproduction is characterized by the following points. 1. It is biparental. Usually, it involves 2 parents. Second, gamete formation takes place in sexual reproduction. Third, fertilization takes place. Fourth, the type of division that takes place in sexual reproduction is mitosis and also meiosis. Meiosis takes place in one or the other phase of the life cycle of organisms that reproduce by sexual reproduction. Another characteristic feature of sexual reproduction is that the daughter cells or the daughter organisms that are formed are genetically different from the parents. Another characteristic that sexual reproduction has a slower rate as compared to the asexual reproduction. It takes more time for multiplication of organisms, those who undergo sexual reproduction. So these are the low rate of multiplication. So those who undergo sexual reproduction multiply at a slower rate as compared to organisms that reproduce by asexual modes. So why is sexual reproduction important then? Even though it has a low rate of multiplication, it is important because sexual reproduction ensures variation. As we have seen that in sexual reproduction, the fertilization takes place and gametes from either different parents, they combine to give rise to a new individual, so it results in variations. Variations are very important for evolution to take place. So the basis for evolution on the face of earth is sexual reproduction. Evolution helps in adaptability. As the new individual, it improves with every generation as there are mixing of characters. So the individuals that reproduce through sexual reproduction are more adaptable as compared to those who reproduce through asexual modes of reproduction. The new individuals that are formed, they have more rigor and vitality. So, it is because of these reasons that sexual reproduction is favorable, it is favored by nature, and huge number of organisms, all the higher organisms, whether it is plants or animals, they have adopted sexual modes of reproduction. After this, we come to the phases of life cycle. The life cycle of any individual consists of basically the three phases. The phases are as follows. Phases in life cycle. The first phase is the juvenile phase. This is the phase in which the individual is born and undergoes certain changes to reach maturity. It develops all its organs, it develops the reproductive organs and reaches to the next phase, which is the reproductive phase. Reproductive phase is that phase in which the individual is able to reproduce and produce organisms of its own kind. The third phase in the life cycle is the senescent phase. In this phase, it marks the end of the reproductive phase, and after the reproductive phase, in the senescent phase, deterioration of physiological as morphological structures in the body of the organism begins. All the organs, the lungs, the liver, the kidneys, they slowly start functioning lesser and lesser. And there are a lot of changes in the organism, and the organism moves towards senescent or aging, which finally results in death. The reproductive phase in almost all organisms is marked by many changes which are visible outwardly as well as they are present inwardly also. In the flowering plant, organisms is marked by many changes which are visible outwardly as well as they are present inwardly also. In the flowering plants, the reproductive phase is marked by the production of flowers. The flowering plants in the reproductive phase can be of two types, the monocarpic plants and the polycarpic plants. Now, what are these monocarpic plants and what are these polycarpic plants? Let us discuss them one by one. Monocarpic plants are those plants which flower once in their life cycle. After monocarpic plants are usually annuals or biennials. Can you guess the example of an annual plant? For example, wheat or maybe rice. These are all annual plants which have their life cycle or complete their life cycle in one growing season. In one growing season, their seed germinates, it grows, it enters into the reproductive phase, they make seeds, they flower, they make seeds, and then they make the fruit and eventually die in one season. Those are called as annuals. Examples are like wheat and rice. Since they grow in a single growing season, so they flower only once in their lifetime. Then comes the biennials. Biennials are those which complete their life cycle in 2 growing seasons. For example, radish. Fine. So, these biennials can also be monocarpic. There are certain perennial plants also, those who can be monocarpic. For example, bamboo. Bamboo is a plant which has a life period of about 50 to 100 years, and all these years it remains in the vegetative or in the juvenile phase. At the end of its lifetime, it flowers, it forms fruits and dies. Similar, another example is that of Nila kuranji or Strobilanthes, Kunthiana. This is another plant which has a life span of about 12 years. At the end of 12 years, it flowers, fruits and then dies. So, the monocarpic flowers or the plants which flower once in their lifetime, they can be either biennials, annuals or perennials like bamboo and Strobilanthes. After the monocarpic plants, let us come to the polycarpic plants. Now, what are these polycarpic plants? These are plants which have the ability to flower many times in their life cycle. You must have seen trees of mango, apple, citrus, oranges. All these trees, they have the ability to flower many times in their life cycle. They are said to be polycarpic plants. So, let us write the examples like the apple trees, the orange, guava. So, all of them, they are polycarpic plants because they flower many times.